This is my news of today, by Remi Jurmain Djalis from the Netherlands. This is my Black African Diaspora World news, December 5, 2025, starting with how Venezuela's military stacks up against U.S. forces in the Caribbean. Source: Firstpost America N18G. The Caribbean is increasingly becoming a tense military theater as the United States positions its forces near Venezuela's coast. The USS Gerald R. Ford, the largest aircraft carrier ever built, now operates in the region alongside nearly 15,000 American troops, 6 surface warships, 3 amphibious ships, 1 submarine, and extensive marine deployments. Washington frames this buildup as a counter-narcotics operation under Operation Southern Spear, but analysts warn the tale suggests broader strategic objectives. Venezuela, with a proud military history, faces a stark disparity in power. According to the 2025 Global Firepower Index, the country ranks 51st out of 145 nations. On paper, Venezuela has a significant force, around 109,000 active-duty troops, 8,000 reservists, and over 220,000 in the National Guard. Its air force comprises 11,500 personnel, operating Soviet-era Russian jets, and the country maintains a modest naval presence. Yet these numbers mask serious weaknesses. Years of economic collapse, hyperinflation, falling oil revenues, and international sanctions have hollowed out maintenance and operational budgets. Nearly 8 million Venezuelans, many of them of military age, have emigrated, further shrinking the nation's manpower. Equipment is aging, and many systems may not be fully functional. The contrast with the United States is stark. The U.S. maintains the world's largest defense budget at $895 billion and ranks third globally in active military personnel. It fields nearly 13,000 aircraft, including over 1,700 fighter jets and nearly 6,000 helicopters. Its naval capabilities include 11 aircraft carriers, floating cities of firepower, compared to Venezuela's single frigate. Even in areas where Venezuela retains a relative advantage, such as coastal patrol vessels, the gap in overall power is massive. Despite these disparities, any potential conflict would be complex. Venezuela retains Russian-supplied missile systems capable of threatening U.S. ships, and its air force could challenge American aircraft in regional engagements. Urban militias could also create asymmetric challenges reminiscent of insurgent warfare in Iraq and Afghanistan, slowing operations and increasing costs. Strategically, Venezuela's limitations are compounded by economic vulnerability. A full-scale military engagement would place immense pressure on the country's already strained resources and population. Analysts question whether the Trump administration, which brands itself as a peace president, would commit to direct confrontation, given the potential costs and risks. Ultimately, the situation around Venezuela highlights a dramatic imbalance. A country with historical pride and regional influence faces a near-insurmountable technological and logistical debt against one of the world's most powerful militaries. While the U.S. emphasizes counter-narcotics objectives, the scale and visibility of its operations suggest a broader strategic posture, aimed at demonstrating power and deterring regional threats. For now, Venezuela remains a cautious observer, while the Caribbean waters increasingly resemble a geopolitical chessboard, with both sides carefully calculating their next moves. My next news is China-Japan tensions rise amid historical disputes and military buildup. Source: YouTube, Shunho, Forum. Tensions between China and Japan have escalated over recent weeks as Japan, under Prime Minister Takaichi, signaled its intention to treat a potential Chinese reunification with Taiwan as a security threat. This has alarmed Beijing, which sees Japan's stance as provocative. Analysts note that much of the international perception frames China as the aggressor, but historical context plays a central role in Chinese and broader Asian apprehension. Sean Rain, a longtime China observer, emphasized that Japan's actions are viewed through the lens of its past military aggression. During World War II, Japan committed widespread atrocities across China and Korea, including the enslavement of hundreds of thousands of women as comfort women, mass killings, and biological experiments conducted by Unit 731. Despite light apologies issued by some Japanese leaders in the 1980s, Rayme notes that many Japanese officials today do not fully acknowledge these historical crimes. This lack of acknowledgement, combined with Japan's current military buildup, has intensified regional fears. Japan plans to double its defense budget over the next 5 years, exceeding China's relative growth over the same period, and has discussed hosting a NATO office in Tokyo. Such moves, along with a perceived rewriting of history, have heightened anxiety in China, South Korea, Singapore, and Malaysia. Rayme drew on decades of personal experience across Asia, including China, the Philippines, South Korea, and Singapore, and interviews with elderly witnesses of Japanese wartime atrocities. These accounts consistently report murders, torture, and sexual violence by the Japanese Imperial Army, highlighting a collective memory that fuels present-day caution. Rayme contrasts Japan's approach with Germany's post-World War II reconciliation. Germany has fully acknowledged its Nazi past, incorporated this history into education, outlawed neo-Nazism, and paid reparations. This transparency has contributed to strong diplomatic ties with Israel. Japan, by contrast, has not fully confronted its wartime actions, contributing to persistent distrust across Asia. The briefing also noted Japan's close alignment with the United States, which maintains approximately 50,000 troops on Japanese soil and nearly 100 military bases. This relationship limits Japan's independent foreign policy and raises concerns that U.S. influence could escalate tensions in the region, particularly as Japan engages in strategic dialogues with NATO and the United States. Rayme highlighted broader implications for global security, stressing that historical lessons must guide modern policy. He warned that ignoring past aggression risks repeating it, noting that China and Russia are signaling the importance of preserving post-World War II frameworks that prevent militaristic escalation. In summary, current China-Japan tensions are not merely about Taiwan or territorial disputes. They are deeply rooted in historical memory, regional security dynamics, and military posturing. Analysts argue that understanding these historical grievances is essential to assessing the risk of escalation and the role of foreign powers in shaping Asia's geopolitical landscape. My next news is Africa News Report, a full-blown industry. Inside Nigeria's kidnapping economy. Source: Africa News Debates, December edition. Kidnapping in northern Nigeria is no longer merely a crime of opportunity. According to security and governance experts featured on the December episode of Africa News Debates, it has evolved into a sophisticated, systematized industry, an economy where human beings are the raw material and ransom payments are the currency. The panel highlighted that kidnapping has become a financially integrated trade, powered by weak state capacity and a network of profiteers who benefit at every stage. At the heart of this crisis lies the simple, brutal principle of supply and demand. The expectation of ransom payments drives the next abduction, creating a predictable cycle that perpetuates the trade. Experts describe the ransom system as a complex ecospace, involving both formal banking channels and informal networks that move and launder money. Families continue to pay despite a 2022 amendment to Nigeria's terrorism laws criminalizing ransom payments. The reason, panelists noted, is a profound lack of trust in the state's ability to rescue loved ones. Security personnel have even reportedly advised families to negotiate directly with abductors, tacitly acknowledging the government's limited capacity to conduct safe rescues. The kidnapping trade is structured like a multi-layered business. Panelists dismantled the myth of the lone gunman, emphasizing the role of community intermediaries who gather intelligence on victims, logistics managers who supply fuel and food and maintain vehicles for raids, and financial handlers who ensure ransom payments reach their intended recipients. This complex ecosystem ensures that dismantling the trade is far more complicated than merely arresting gunmen, as each stage generates profits for someone, reinforcing the industry's survival. Experts also pointed to the economic environment as a key driver of recruitment. Years of economic reforms, compounded by recent shocks such as fuel subsidy removal and naira devaluation, have pushed millions of Nigerians to the brink. Rapid inflation and high unemployment make crime an attractive alternative to legitimate work. Young men now often view kidnapping as a career path, offering a living wage that legal employment cannot match. The debate also focused on governance failures. Critics argued that Nigerian authorities send mixed signals by publicly banning ransom payments, while allegedly negotiating releases behind closed doors. The consensus was that the government has failed to disrupt the financial system supporting kidnappers, protect families forced to pay, or address the recruitment pipeline fueled by poverty. Experts proposed a multiple-point intervention to address the crisis. They argued that tackling kidnapping requires more than military operations. The strategy must include prosecuting white-collar benefactors, providing safe alternatives for families so they are not coerced into paying ransoms, and fixing the economic rot that makes crime a viable career option for youth. As the panel concluded, treating the symptoms alone will not solve Nigeria's kidnapping epidemic. The country must dismantle the economy that sustains it, targeting both the financial incentives and structural conditions that allow the trade to thrive. Only by addressing these root causes can the cycle of abduction, ransom, and profit be broken. My next news is Africa News report Nigeria school kidnapping. 2 weeks on, over 250 children still held. Source: Africa News, last updated 2 minutes ago. It has been an agonizing 2 weeks for parents of school children abducted by gunmen in Nigeria, and the uncertainty shows no sign of abating. Over 250 children remain in captivity following the attack on a Catholic boarding school on the morning of November 21st, when more than 300 students and staff were forcibly taken by armed assailants. According to school authorities, approximately 50 children managed to escape during the raid. Nonetheless, the majority of the students are still held, leaving families desperate for news. Many parents have expressed frustration and fear, claiming that authorities have not treated the situation with the urgency they believe it warrants. The abduction is among the worst mass raids in Nigeria since the 2014 kidnapping of 276 schoolgirls in Chibok by the extremist group Boko Haram. That earlier event drew global attention and prompted international condemnation, highlighting the ongoing threats to educational institutions in parts of West Africa. Nigerian security forces report that efforts are ongoing to rescue the abducted children, yet the assurances have done little to comfort anxious parents. In response to the crisis, President Bola Tinubu declared a security emergency and has called for the recruitment of additional personnel to bolster protective measures. Mass abductions of school children have become alarmingly common in Nigeria, where numerous armed groups operate with varying objectives. Some of these groups specialize in kidnappings for ransom, exploiting the demand for financial payments from families, communities, and authorities alike. Since 2014, there have been at least 12 mass abductions of school students, according to a tally by the Associated Press. In total, at least 1,799 students have been kidnapped during this period, though some have never been recovered. The ongoing incidents underscore the persistent insecurity in regions affected by armed groups, which continue to target educational institutions as part of their operations. Local and national authorities have faced criticism for the perceived lack of rapid action to secure the release of the children. Parents argue that delays and inconsistent communication exacerbate the trauma, leaving families feeling powerless. Meanwhile, security forces insist they are employing both military and intelligence resources to locate and safely retrieve the abducted children. The psychological and social impact of such kidnappings is profound. Children who escape or are released often suffer long-term trauma, while families grapple with anxiety and uncertainty during periods of captivity. Schools across affected areas are also increasingly on high alert, with security measures being strengthened to prevent future raids. Analysts warn that unless systemic changes are implemented, such as improved security infrastructure, better intelligence coordination, and preventive measures, Nigeria may continue to face repeated abductions, putting thousands of children at risk each year. As the clock ticks beyond 2 weeks since the initial attack, the fate of over 250 school children remains unknown, highlighting the urgent need for concerted action by Nigerian authorities, local communities, and international partners to ensure the safe return of the abducted children. My next news is Africa News report, Global Hunger Monitor confirms famine in 2 Sudanese cities. Source: Africa News with AP. A global hunger observatory has confirmed famine conditions in the Sudanese cities of Al-Fashir and Kadugli, as ongoing conflict continues to devastate the region. Al-Fashir recently fell to the Paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, RSF, while Kadugli, located in southern Sudan, remains besieged. Previously, the UN-backed Integrated Food Security Phase Classification, IPC, had only confirmed famine in camps for displaced persons surrounding Al-Fashir. This new confirmation marks a troubling escalation, indicating that the crisis is now affecting urban populations in addition to camps. Thousands of civilians are fleeing Al-Fashir for surrounding towns, including Tawila, Melit, and Tarsha, seeking safety and access to food. Many have recounted harrowing experiences under the city's 18-month siege. Habib Allah Yaqub, a displaced person, described the extreme conditions. There was no food, no transportation, and it was very difficult to leave home to find water or food. Yaqub also reported being struck by a random bullet while attempting to fetch water from a public pump. Residents have described being forced to eat animal feed and, at times, the hides of animals due to the complete cutoff of food supplies. Aid organizations have expressed grave concern for tens of thousands of people still trapped in Al-Fashir or unaccounted for as they attempted to flee. The United Nations has received credible reports of atrocities committed by the RSF against civilians in Al-Fashir, including summary executions and sexual violence, particularly targeting women and girls. The ITC also warned that famine conditions threaten 20 other areas across Darfur and the central Kordofan region, where conflict has intensified in recent months. Prolonged fighting between the RSF and the Sudanese army over the past 30 months has contributed to widespread hunger and malnutrition, creating a humanitarian emergency of unprecedented scale. Al-Fashir was the last of Darfur's 5 state capitals to fall under RSF control in the ongoing struggle for dominance over Sudan. The United Nations estimates that over 40,000 people have been killed in the conflict, though experts believe the actual death toll is likely significantly higher. More than 14 million people have been displaced from their homes, marking the crisis as one of the worst humanitarian emergencies in the world. The confirmation of famine in Al-Fashir and Kadugli underscores the urgent need for international humanitarian intervention. Food, water, and medical aid are urgently required to prevent further loss of life. Experts stress that immediate action is necessary not only to address the current famine but also to provide long-term support for displaced populations and mitigate the risks posed by ongoing conflict. The situation in Sudan continues to deteriorate, with civilians bearing the brunt of violence and food insecurity. Without sustained humanitarian support and a resolution to the conflict between the RSF and the army, famine and malnutrition are expected to worsen, with devastating consequences for millions of Sudanese. The next news is Africa News report: UN sounds alarm on landmine deaths amid funding cuts for demining. Source: Africa News with agencies. The United Nations has issued a stark warning as landmine-related deaths and injuries continue to rise amid significant funding cuts to global demining programs. International experts meeting in Geneva stressed that the legacy of past and ongoing conflicts continues to endanger civilians on a near-daily basis. The United Nations Mine Action Service (UNMIS) reported that while mine clearance in the occupied Palestinian territory and Sudan is currently reasonably well-funded, the situation in Afghanistan and Nigeria is critical. Without renewed donor support, demining programs in these countries and Ethiopia face closure by March, UNMIS officials warned. Crystal Lupforest, the UNMIS representative in Geneva, emphasized the urgency of the situation. Programs in Afghanistan, Nigeria, and Ethiopia face closure without fresh donor support. This could have devastating consequences for civilians, she said. In Sudan, the landmine crisis remains acute, particularly in the capital, Khartoum, where 1.5 million civilians have returned amid the ongoing conflict between the Sudanese Armed Forces and the Paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, RSF. Only 5 UNMIS clearance teams are currently operating in Sudan, all based in Khartoum, due to the high level of need. Sadiq Rashid, UNMIS chief in Sudan, expressed deep concern for the city of Al-Fashir, which endured a siege lasting more than 500 days. Even now, the shelling has not completely stopped. There are reports of landmines in the area, and access remains extremely challenging, Rashid said. In Nigeria, demining teams are increasingly worried as camps for displaced communities begin to close. Civilians returning to their homes face the risk of encountering unexploded ordnances hidden in previously abandoned areas. Edwin Fagemain, UNMISS chief of the Mine Action Program in Nigeria, said, "Our analysis shows that 80% of all civilian casualties are occurring in 11 of the 15 areas of return." UNMISS has responded by training Nigerian security forces, police, and civil defense workers on mine risk education, particularly in unstable, hard-to-reach locations. Officials stressed that mine action programs are often mischaracterized as long-term recovery initiatives, when in reality they are urgent humanitarian interventions that save lives. The UN highlighted that the global reduction in funding for demining programs is placing millions of civilians at risk, particularly in regions recovering from armed conflict. Demining is essential not only for civilian safety, but also to enable the safe return of displaced populations, restore agricultural activity, and support broader reconstruction efforts. Experts urged the international community to prioritize demining funding, calling it a life-saving necessity rather than a long-term development project. The ongoing threat of landmines underscores the lasting dangers of armed conflicts, long after active hostilities have ended, and demonstrates the urgent need for sustained international support to prevent further civilian casualties. Without immediate action and renewed financial commitments, the UN warned, landmine deaths and injuries will continue to rise in Afghanistan, Nigeria, Sudan, and Ethiopia, further exacerbating humanitarian crises across these regions. My next news is Africa News report: Trump praises Rwanda and Democratic Republic of Congo leaders as they sign peace deal. Source: Africa News with AP. United States President Donald Trump praised the leaders of Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo on Thursday, following the signing of a peace agreement aimed at ending decades of conflict in eastern Congo. The televised ceremony in Washington provided Trump with an opportunity to highlight his role as a dealmaker on the international stage. "These are two men that are doing a great job," Trump said. "They want to get on to other ways of living for their people, and they are great leaders." The agreement was signed by Rwanda's Paul Kagame and Congo's Felix Tshisekedi, who spoke with cautious optimism about the pact. Kagame noted that the region had largely been overlooked by international media, but praised Trump for seeing an opportunity to contribute to peace. "No one was asking President Trump to take up this task. Our region is far from the headlines," Kagame said. But when the president saw the opportunity to contribute to peace, he immediately took it. Tshisekedi described the deal as the beginning of a new, albeit challenging, path. "I do believe this day is the beginning of a new path. A demanding path, yes, indeed quite difficult. But this is a path where peace will not just be a wish, an aspiration, but a turning point." Despite the hopeful tone, analysts caution that the agreement may not immediately end hostilities or resolve the humanitarian crisis in eastern Congo. Reports indicate clashes continue between the Congolese army and Rwanda-backed M23 rebels in South Kivu province. The M23 group did not attend the Washington meetings and is not bound by the new Congo-Rwanda agreement. The rebels have been participating in separate peace talks mediated by Qatar. The White House hailed the pact as historic, emphasizing that it formalizes months of U.S.-led peace efforts in collaboration with the African Union and Qatar. The agreement builds on an earlier deal signed in June and complements a regional economic integration framework previously agreed upon by the three nations. Officials said this framework would define economic partnerships and facilitate trade and investment between the countries. As part of the ceremony, President Trump also announced bilateral agreements between the United States and both Congo and Rwanda. These agreements aim to unlock opportunities for American access to critical minerals, which could boost the economies of all three nations. The deal represents a rare high-profile success for Trump's foreign policy in Africa, an area often overlooked in United States diplomatic initiatives. While the agreement does not guarantee an immediate end to violence, it signals a commitment by regional leaders to pursue dialogue and collaboration, both politically and economically. Observers caution that long-term peace will require continued engagement from all parties involved, as well as concrete measures to address ongoing security and humanitarian challenges. The United States and its international partners will likely play a monitoring role to ensure compliance with the agreement and support regional stability. Thursday's signing highlights the complex interplay between diplomacy, economic interests, and security in Central Africa. While challenges remain on the ground, the public display of cooperation between Kagame, Tshisekedi, and the United States marks a symbolic step toward reducing conflict in the region and promoting broader regional integration. My next news is BBC News report: grand jury declines to charge New York Attorney General Letitia James. A federal grand jury in Virginia has declined to indict New York Attorney General Letitia James, days after a judge dismissed the first case against her. The decision marks another setback for former President Donald Trump's efforts to prosecute political opponents, a pattern that has also included former FBI Director James Comey. Last month, a federal judge dismissed cases against James and Comey after ruling that the prosecutor appointed by Trump was not legally in the post. The dismissed case against James alleged she committed bank fraud and made false statements to a financial institution, accusations she consistently described as politically motivated. CBS News, a U.S. partner of the BBC, reported that the grand jury declined to sign off on an indictment, citing an unnamed official. Both cases were dismissed without prejudice, meaning the government could attempt to pursue them again in the future. Grand juries, composed of members of the public, determine whether probable cause exists to believe a crime has been committed, but they do not determine guilt or innocence. It is highly unusual for a grand jury to decline a prosecutor's request to indict. According to CBS News, federal prosecutors investigated more than 150,000 people in 2016, and grand juries declined to file charges in only 6 cases. The federal case alleged that James misrepresented her primary residence when purchasing a 3-bedroom home in Norfolk. Prosecutors claimed she indicated the property was a secondary residence to secure favorable mortgage terms unavailable for an investment property. Unnamed sources reported that James purchased the home in 2020 for her great-niece, who never paid rent for the property. In a statement on Thursday, James praised the grand jury's decision, saying, "As I have said from the start, the charges against me are baseless. It is time for this unchecked weaponization of our justice system to stop." Her lawyer, Abe David Lowell, described the grand jury's refusal as a decisive rejection of a case that should never have existed. He added that continued attempts to prosecute James would be a shocking assault on the rule of law and a devastating blow to the integrity of our justice system. James, as New York's top lawyer, has previously led high-profile civil cases, including a 2022 lawsuit against Trump and the Trump Organization for falsifying records to obtain better loan deals. Trump was initially ordered to pay $500 million United States dollars, roughly 376 million British pounds, but an appeals court later reduced the penalty, upholding that he was liable for fraud but calling the original fine excessive. James and Comey are not the only Trump political opponents to face federal scrutiny. John Bolton, Trump's former national security advisor, is currently charged with sending and willfully retaining national defense information. The Virginia grand jury's decision adds to a growing pattern in which courts and legal bodies have pushed back against attempts to target former political rivals. For James, the refusal to indict reinforces her position and credibility, as she continues to hold her office in New York, while highlighting ongoing tensions between the former president and his adversaries in both legal and political arenas. My next news is BBC News report: New Orleans residents gripped by fear as Trump immigration crackdown intensifies. New Orleans residents have been thrown into fear and confusion as day one of the Trump administration's latest immigration crackdown, codenamed Catahoula Crunch, descended on the city. In Kenner, a suburb outside New Orleans, 2 laborers stood on the roof of a house as United States Border Patrol agents scaled a ladder to arrest them. With a sniper taking position and officers aiming weapons from below, neighbors and activists watched in shock as the dramatic operation unfolded. Activist Zoe Higgins, documenting the incident, said the men had simply come to work to provide for their families, and described the detention as terrifying. The Department of Homeland Security, DHS, said several illegal aliens had climbed onto the roof and refused to comply. One person was arrested, although DHS refused to answer questions about the workers' immigration status or whether agents had a warrant. On Thursday, DHS reported that dozens of individuals, some previously arrested or convicted of crimes, were detained in the Louisiana suite, part of Trump's pledge for the largest deportation operation in United States history. New Orleans is the fourth major city targeted in President Donald Trump's promised mass deportation effort, which remains highly popular among his supporters but fiercely opposed in Democrat-led cities. Border Patrol Commander Greg Bovino, wearing a flak jacket and traveling with the enforcement teams, vowed to go after the worst of the worst, undocumented migrants. Whether we do it on foot, in vehicles, in the air, or in the water, this is what we do. Media reports suggest officials aim to make 5,000 arrests in New Orleans, though City Council President J.P. Morrell said the city could not possibly contain anywhere near 5,000 criminals, let alone violent ones. Latino communities living in lockdown. In Kenner, many Latino residents are effectively staying indoors. Restaurants, normally bustling, now operate mainly through deliveries. At Abigail's Mexican restaurant, the doors are bolted. Abigail, who came to the United States from Mexico City at 10 years old, said her family now sleeps inside the restaurant out of fear. All this business is from immigrants, she said. People feel afraid to go out. They feel sad about this situation. The Pew Research Center estimates that up to 14 million people live in the United States without legal permission, targeting criminals. But many have no record. DHS says the operation targets undocumented migrants with criminal allegations. The agency released mugshots blaming sanctuary city policies for allowing them to stay in the community. However, leaked data from previous cities targeted shows most of those arrested had no criminal past. New Orleans, a city of roughly 1 million residents, is 13% Hispanic. Many arrived to rebuild the city after Hurricane Katrina in 2005. Political divide widens. New Orleans leaders oppose the raids, but Louisiana's Republican governor, Jeff Landry, supports them. Detained migrants may be held at Angola, the nation's largest maximum security prison, located on a former slave plantation. Across the region, including the 24-mile-long Lake Pontchartrain Causeway, Trump supporters and skeptics live side by side. Some residents argue undocumented migrants must leave. Others, including Trump voters, say the situation is complex, questioning why families without criminal histories should be targeted. Recent polling shows declining approval for Trump's handling of immigration, even among Republicans. Back in Kenner, fear and uncertainty deepen, as another tense chapter unfolds in America's long and bitter struggle over immigration. My next news is BBC News report: Kenya signs landmark health deal with United States despite data privacy concerns. Kenya has signed a historic 5-year health agreement with the United States, the first such pact since former President Donald Trump overhauled American foreign aid policy. The deal, valued at $2.5 billion United States dollars, roughly 1.9 billion British pounds, focuses on combating infectious diseases in Kenya. Washington plans to establish similar government-to-government agreements with other African nations aligned with Trump's wider foreign policy goals. While the partnership is billed as a move to improve transparency and accountability, it has raised serious concerns that the United States could gain real-time access to Kenya's critical health databases, including sensitive patient information. Kenya's Health Minister Aden Duale sought to reassure the public, emphasizing that only de-identified, aggregated data would be shared. Trump's foreign aid overhaul. On his first day in office in January, Trump froze foreign aid, dismantled the United States Agency for International Development, USAID, and cut billions from funding to poorer nations. This has already caused severe shortages of essential medicines in developing countries. In September, the administration launched an America First global health strategy, making aid conditional on negotiations intended to reduce waste and advance U.S. geopolitical priorities. Financial breakdown of the deal. Under the new agreement, the United States will contribute $1.7 billion United States dollars. Kenya will cover $850 million United States dollars, gradually assuming greater responsibility over time. The funding will target HIV and AIDS, malaria, tuberculosis, maternal health, polio eradication, outbreak response and preparedness for infectious diseases, diplomacy and regional cooperation. During the signing ceremony, held with President William Ruto, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio hailed Kenya as a long-standing American ally. He also praised Kenya's leadership in the UN-backed Haiti mission to combat violent gangs. If we had 5 or 10 countries willing to do even half of what Kenya has done, it would be extraordinary, Rubio said. He added that the United States intends to channel foreign aid directly to governments, rather than through NGOs. We are not going to spend billions of dollars funding the NGO industrial complex, while close partners like Kenya have little say in how health money is spent. President Ruto pledged that the funds would be managed responsibly and would help purchase modern medical equipment and strengthen Kenya's health workforce. Data privacy concerns intensify. Despite official assurances, many Kenyans are demanding disclosure of the full agreement. Critics fear the United States could access personal health records, including HIV status, tuberculosis histories, vaccination records, genomic information, and other sensitive medical data. Lawyer Willis Otieno questioned on X, what specific data categories are being shared? Are genomic data, disease patterns, mental health data, insurance claims, hospital records, or biometrics included? If not, why is that not explicitly written? Well-known whistleblower Nelson Amenya echoed these concerns, urging the government to release the full text of the deal, so we can read it for ourselves. Minister Dwali dismissed the fears, insisting Kenya's health data remains secure. Your health data is a national strategic asset. United States officials have not yet commented on the data concerns. Several other African nations are expected to sign similar agreements by the end of the year, according to U.S. officials. My next news is, BBC News report, both strike briefings ease pressure on HECF, but video release could backfire. Bipartisan concern briefly emerged in Washington after a Washington Post investigation raised questions about a September United States military strike on a suspected narcotics trafficking boat in the Caribbean. The scrutiny prompted speculation that Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, narrowly confirmed in January, might be facing instability in his position. Republican Congressman Mike Turner said on Thursday morning that lawmakers were very concerned, noting doubts about the information provided by the Trump administration. However, by Thursday afternoon, after senior lawmakers reviewed operational footage and heard from the admiral overseeing the mission, the familiar partisan divide resurfaced. Republicans defended the operation and praised Hegseth, while Democrats condemned what they saw and demanded further inquiry. The divide stems from disagreement over the legality and morality of the administration's expanded anti-narcotics campaign in the Caribbean. This includes designating narcotics traffickers as terrorist organizations and using lethal force against civilians without external legal oversight. Since that initial September strike, the United States has carried out at least 22 similar operations, resulting in more than 80 deaths. The Washington Post reported last Friday that U.S. forces launched 2 attacks on the same vessel, with the second strike killing 2 survivors who were in the water clinging to the smoldering wreck. The paper also alleged that Hegseth ordered troops to kill them all. Hegseth has denied issuing such an order, saying he witnessed only the first strike and left the room before the second. After briefings from General Dan Kane, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and Admiral Frank Bradley, who authorized the second strike, lawmakers said they heard no evidence that Hegseth gave a kill everybody command. But their interpretations of the video sharply diverged. Democrat Jim Himes of Connecticut called the footage deeply, deeply troubling, saying the 2 individuals killed were clearly distressed and posed no threat. Republican Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas disagreed, describing the survivors as trying to ride a drug-laden boat to stay in the fight. For now, these contrasting accounts and the original reporting are the only information available to the public. That may soon change. Former President Donald Trump has said he supports releasing the video of the second strike, as the Pentagon has done with other recent Caribbean operations. If the footage is as disturbing as Democrats claim, it could influence public opinion, which has so far divided along partisan lines. By Thursday evening, Hegseth's position appeared more secure, helped by an Inspector General report that left him largely unscathed. The report concluded he did not transmit classified information during the Signalgate scandal because he said he had already declassified the data, though it criticized him for putting personnel and objectives at risk by discussing sensitive matters on an unsecured app. For now, two potentially damaging controversies have been neutralized. But observers say Hegseth may soon face new scrutiny as the administration's Caribbean operations continue. My next news is BBC News report: police recover Faberge egg swallowed by New Zealand man. Police in New Zealand have successfully recovered a diamond-studded Faberge egg locket, which a 32-year-old man attempted to steal by swallowing it inside Partridge Jewellers in central Auckland. The luxury locket, valued at New Zealand dollars 33,585, around 19,300 United States dollars, was retrieved naturally, with no medical procedure required, authorities told the BBC. The egg-shaped locket, known as the Octopussy egg, is decorated with 60 white diamonds and 15 blue sapphires and opens to reveal an 18-karat gold miniature octopus. It was inspired by the 1983 James Bond film Octopussy, which also features a Faberge egg at the center of a heist. The suspect was arrested within minutes of ingesting the jewelry. He has been charged with theft and remains under police monitoring for safety reasons while in custody. He is expected to appear in court again on 8 December. According to charge documents, he also faces additional accusations, including stealing an iPad from the same store on 12 November, and taking cat litter and flea control products worth 100 New Zealand dollars from a private address the following day. Partridge Jewellers has stated the recovered locket will be returned to the Faberge company. My next news is source: BBC News, Friday, 1 hour ago, December the 5th, 2025. India is experiencing severe travel disruption after Indigo, the country's largest airline, cancelled hundreds of flights on Friday. This follows 3 days of widespread delays and route cancellations that have left thousands of passengers stranded across major cities. Indigo controls roughly 60% of India's aviation market and operates more than 2,000 flights daily. However, the airline has been unable to maintain normal service due to a shortage of pilots. The shortage stems from Indigo's failure to properly adjust to newly introduced crew rostering rules, which require more rest hours for pilots and place stricter limits on nighttime duties. With the disruptions intensifying, all Indigo departures from the capital, Delhi, were cancelled on Friday. The airline has said it does not expect full normal operations to resume until the 10th of February. Starting from the 8th of December, it will reduce the number of scheduled flights in an attempt to stabilize its operations and minimize further problems. The Indian government is closely monitoring the situation. The Federal Aviation Minister has publicly expressed clear displeasure at how the airline has handled the crisis. India's aviation regulator issued a separate statement criticizing the situation as the result of misjudgment and planning gaps in Indigo's implementation of the new flight duty time limitation rules. The regulator has ordered Indigo to submit an immediate and comprehensive plan covering crew hiring, training, roster restructuring, safety risk assessments, and other measures to prevent similar breakdowns. Local media reports suggested that the airline had been granted limited relief from the new rules, including easing the ban on combining pilot leave with weekly rest. The BBC has not independently confirmed this. The Airline Pilots Association of India strongly criticized any relaxation of the duty time rules. The association argued that such relief undermines the purpose of the new regulations and gravely compromises passenger safety. The updated rules significantly increased pilot rest periods and reduced the required number of nighttime landings from 6 per week to 2. The timing of the crisis is particularly disruptive, as December marks one of India's busiest travel periods, with school holidays, religious events, and the peak wedding season pushing demand sharply upward. Indigo has stated that it will waive cancellation and rescheduling fees for passengers traveling between the 5th and 15th of December. It has also promised hotel accommodation and meals for stranded passengers. Despite these measures, many travelers have expressed anger online, reporting long waits without reliable updates or access to food at overcrowded airports. Among those affected was Singapore's High Commissioner to India, Simon Wong, who said he was lost for words after missing the wedding of a young member of his staff due to the flight cancellations. Major airports in Delhi, Mumbai, and several other cities have issued advisories urging passengers to check their flight status before traveling to the airport. My next news is source, BBC News, summary updated on Thursday, December the 5th, 2025. This report covers Russian President Vladimir Putin's visit to India, where he pledged that Russia is prepared to supply India with uninterrupted shipments of fuel despite strong objections from United States President Donald Trump. Washington has pressured Delhi to halt its purchases of Russian oil, arguing that the trade helps fund Russia's war in Ukraine. In response, the United States imposed an additional 25% tariff on Indian goods because India continued buying discounted Russian crude. Putin made his remarks during a joint media briefing with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Both leaders praised a set of cooperation agreements signed earlier in the day. These include expanding Indian consulates in Russia and boosting collaboration across shipping, energy, mineral resources, and training for Indian seafarers navigating polar routes. The visit took place as the United States pursues diplomatic efforts to end the war in Ukraine. Nevertheless, Putin repeated his position that Ukraine must withdraw from the Donbass region or Russia will seize it outright. This firm stance underscores the limited prospects for peace in the near term. Chinese media's reaction. Coverage in Chinese state and semi-official outlets emphasized the geopolitical tension between India and the United States. Chinese analysts noted that India finds it impossible to cut energy ties with Russia due to its substantial fuel needs. Xinhua news agency cited experts who argue that sanctions and outside pressure from the United States and its Western allies are unlikely to disrupt India-Russia cooperation. The Global Times, quoting Li Haidong of the China Foreign Affairs University, described the India-Russia relationship as built on extensive mutual support and strong complementarity. Lin Minwang of Fudan University added that Putin's trip holds significant symbolic value, as Russia has sought frequent high-level contact since 2022, even while India kept its engagement measured. He warned, however, that shifting global political dynamics make the long-term direction of India-Russia relations uncertain. Trade above all else. India editor Vikas Pandey noted that the tone of the meeting between Putin and Modi showed clear mutual respect, but there were no major defense announcements. Expected deals on fighter jets or missile systems did not materialize. Instead, the focus was almost entirely on trade cooperation. Agreements were signed in civil nuclear energy, shipbuilding, new shipping routes, polar training for Indian seafarers, and critical minerals. Putin expressed confidence that current bilateral trade, already exceeding $60 billion United States dollars, could rise to $100 billion United States dollars soon. This is noteworthy because much of the present trade volume depends on India's purchase of discounted Russian oil. However, some Indian companies have begun reducing their imports of Russian crude to comply with newly introduced United States sanctions. Although neither leader spoke directly about oil, the overall strategy clearly aims to deepen economic ties while navigating increasing American pressure. Russia, under heavy Western sanctions, is seeking stable economic partnerships. India, meanwhile, is facing 50% tariffs from Washington. For both countries, strengthening trade links has become a strategic priority. My next news is source, Reuters, Friday, December the 5th, 2025. This report outlines a new partnership between South Korea's Industry Ministry and ARM Holdings, the chip design unit owned by SoftBank. According to a presidential policy advisor, Kim Yong-byum, the two sides signed a memorandum of understanding aimed at strengthening South Korea's semiconductor and artificial intelligence sectors. The agreement includes a plan for ARM to establish a chip design training center in South Korea, building on the company's global expertise. The planned program aims to train roughly 1,400 advanced chip design specialists. Kim explained that this effort will help reinforce South Korea's system semiconductor and fabless sectors, which remain relatively weaker compared to its world-leading memory chip industry. By developing more talent in these areas, the government hopes to boost long-term competitiveness in the broader semiconductor ecosystem. ARM, a British chip and software company, licenses its processor designs to global manufacturers and earns revenue from royalties. Its role in this initiative signals deeper cooperation between international technology leaders and South Korea's growing artificial intelligence sector. SoftBank Chief Executive Masayoshi Son met South Korean President Lee Jae-myung on Friday. Kim quoted Son as saying that global demand for chips will surge rapidly as artificial intelligence technologies advance. Son also highlighted that South Korea faces an energy supply challenge, calling the energy sector a weak point that could constrain the expansion of artificial intelligence infrastructure in the country. Son reiterated his long-held belief that artificial intelligence will surpass human intelligence, predicting that artificial superintelligence will eventually become 10,000 times smarter than people. He suggested it is time to move beyond the idea that humans can control, teach, or manage artificial intelligence, and instead begin considering how societies can coexist with it in a harmonious way. South Korea aims to become one of the world's top 3 powers in artificial intelligence. In pursuit of this goal, President Lee has recently met several major global technology leaders, including OpenAI Chief Executive Sam Altman and NVIDIA Chief Executive Jensen Huang. These meetings reflect the government's strong push to integrate leading-edge technology partnerships into its long-term strategy. In October, Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix signed letters of intent to supply memory chips for OpenAI's data centers as part of its Stargate project, a large private initiative supported by SoftBank and Oracle to build next-generation data center infrastructure. This collaboration underscores the central role South Korean firms play in the global semiconductor supply chain. Son is also expected to meet SK Group Chairman Chae Tae-won later on Friday to discuss additional cooperation opportunities in artificial intelligence and semiconductor development. According to a report by the Dongga Ilbo newspaper, SK Group declined to comment. NVIDIA announced in late October that it would supply more than 260,000 of its most advanced artificial intelligence chips to the South Korean government and major domestic companies, including Samsung Electronics. This large commitment further strengthens South Korea's position as a key hub for artificial intelligence development and advanced chip deployment. My next news is Source: Fortune, by Nick Lichtenberg, updated Thursday, December 4, 2025. This report outlines the warnings issued by Bill Gates in the 2025 Goalkeepers report titled, "We Cannot Stop at Almost." Gates, chair of the Gates Foundation, highlights a turning point in global child health after decades of progress. He stresses that the rise in deaths among children younger than 5 years old marks a significant reversal that should concern anyone who values scientific and humanitarian progress. For the first time in the 21st century, global child mortality is expected to increase. Modeling by the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation shows that in 2024, 4,600,000 children died before their 5th birthday. In 2025, the number is projected to rise by slightly more than 200,000, reaching an estimated 4,800,000 deaths. Gates emphasizes that this means thousands of classrooms of children lost before they even learn basic skills such as writing their name. This reversal comes at a time when international funding for global health has sharply declined, dropping 26.9% below 2024 levels. In the United States, the Trump administration's dismantling of the United States Agency for International Development and substantial foreign aid cuts have contributed to the crisis. Gates argues that if funding cuts continue, the consequences will be catastrophic. The report estimates that a 20% reduction in global health funding could lead to an additional 12 million child deaths by 2045. If the cuts reach 30%, an additional 16 million children could die by that same year. He warns that the world risks becoming a generation that had access to unprecedented scientific advances but failed to invest in saving lives. Earlier this year, Gates committed nearly all of his remaining wealth, about $100 billion United States dollars, to the Gates Foundation. His goal is to eradicate or substantially reduce major diseases and continue lowering global child mortality. However, he underscores that the foundation cannot accomplish this alone. Significant government support, especially from wealthier nations, is essential. He also notes that for infectious diseases, achieving 0 cases is crucial because these diseases can reemerge after being nearly eliminated. The 2025 Goalkeepers report outlines a roadmap for protecting progress and preventing millions of premature deaths among children. Despite shrinking budgets worldwide, Dates emphasizes that proven tools and next-generation innovations exist right now to preserve gains in global health. The immediate task, he says, is to do more with less. The report identifies several preventable threats, such as malaria, human immunodeficiency virus, and newborn complications, that remain leading causes of child mortality. It recommends a concentrated focus on efforts that have shown the greatest impact. The first element of the report's three-part strategy is prioritizing primary health care. The report states that building strong primary healthcare systems is the most cost-effective investment available. With less than $100 per person per year, these systems can prevent up to 90% of child deaths by detecting diseases like pneumonia early and ensuring safe childbirth. Dates concludes that the world must avoid becoming the generation that almost ended preventable child deaths. To secure lasting progress, countries must renew their commitments, strengthen health systems, and ensure that life-saving innovations reach every child who needs them. My next news. Source: Yahoo News, by Jacob Sullum, published on Thursday, December 4, 2025. This report summarizes the issues raised by the September 2 anti-drug operation ordered under President Donald Trump's new military campaign in the Caribbean and the Eastern Pacific. The incident has drawn intense scrutiny because Admiral Frank M. Bradley authorized a second missile strike on a disabled drug smuggling boat, killing 2 survivors who were floating in the water after the first attack. According to briefings given to lawmakers, including Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman Dan Kane, the initial missile strike killed 9 people and left 2 men alive. Those surviving men were clinging to wreckage after their vessel was destroyed. Bradley acknowledged that he knew the men had survived the first strike. However, because they radioed for assistance from nearby traffickers, he ordered a second missile launch that killed both individuals instantly. Unnamed United States officials told the New York Times that this second strike was carried out to prevent possible recovery of cocaine that might have remained on the destroyed vessel. Many legal experts described this action as a clear violation of the law of war. Michael Schmidt, a former Air Force lawyer and professor emeritus at the United States Naval War College, stated that killing unarmed people stranded in the water cannot be justified under any known standard. He noted that lethal force is only permissible when an imminent threat exists. The Defense Department's Law of War manual explicitly states that firing on shipwrecked individuals is illegal. Bradley reportedly argued that the 2 men were not technically shipwrecked because they were still engaged in a hostile act, which he interpreted from their radio call. The manual defines shipwrecked persons as those who are helpless, in distress, and refraining from hostile action. Bradley claimed the survivors failed to meet that final criterion because he believed they were still trying to continue their smuggling mission. The broader controversy revolves around the Trump administration's attempt to redefine drug smuggling as an act equivalent to armed conflict. Trump repeatedly described drug trafficking as an armed attack against the United States, asserting that suspected smugglers may be treated as combatants. This framing, however, lacks statutory support and departs sharply from long-standing interpretations of both domestic and international law. In reality, the September 2 incident involved no exchange of fire, no attack on United States forces, and no combat activity of any kind. The destroyed boat reportedly attempted to flee after spotting a military aircraft, but offered no resistance. Subsequent attacks on other suspected drug boats have killed 72 additional people, again without putting United States personnel in danger. Administration lawyers even argued that these operations do not constitute hostilities under the War Powers Resolution because there is no risk to American forces. Yet the same lawyers insist the targets are combatants in a non-international armed conflict. This contradiction lies at the heart of the criticism. If there is no real armed conflict, then applying the law of war to justify killing unarmed survivors makes no sense. Interpreting a call for help as a hostile act stretches the rules far beyond their intended meaning. The men killed in the second strike were unarmed, isolated, and posed no immediate danger. The incident underscores the dangers of redefining criminal enforcement as warfare. Even if drug smuggling is a serious crime, it does not justify summary execution without due process or legal authority. The strategy adopted in this operation reflects a policy shift toward lethal force that many observers argue is both unlawful and ethically indefensible. My next news is, in the next video, I am Remi Jurmain Djalis with my Black African Diaspora World news of today, from the Netherlands.